In the Grand Throne Room, a decision was announced to honor the doctor for her contribution to creating the Elixir of Immortality, which grants eternal life untouched by aging or death. This doctor was Hyuk Bai-woo, known as the greatest in the Empire, kneeling in solemnity. A sense of relief washed over her as she believed in her heart that the hell she had lived through and the suffering she had endured to reach this moment had finally come to an end. From atop his throne, the Emperor asked if she had brought the elixir with her as expected, to which she replied in the affirmative, confirming it to him. At that moment, one of the advisors stepped forward to address her, saying it was a great honor for her family that a medicine of her making would be used on the most supreme and noble of bodies. Meanwhile, two ladies of the court whispered disdainfully about her humble Eastern origins, wondering what family pride she could possibly possess, especially after abandoning her family, which was said to have completely perished. Hyuk Bai-woo ignored their mockery, paying no mind to those she secretly described as racist bastards. Her entire focus was on her sole goal, securing the imperial family's treasure, a glowing blue jewel kept inside an ornate box. The Emperor reminded her that she had previously mentioned a wish she desired in exchange for providing the Elixir of Immortality, which she acknowledged. However, with a cunning smile, the Emperor expressed his regret, explaining that it seemed difficult for him to grant that wish. The doctor was shocked by his sudden answer, and before she could process what was happening, one of the guards behind her drew his sword from its scabbard. In a swift motion, the guard swung his massive sword at her back. The attack caught her off guard and struck her mortally. She fell upon the steps of the throne, gasping for breath, while the Emperor revealed his true intentions, admitting that the more he thought about it, the more he feared leaving her alive, lest she create the elixir of immortality for others. She knelt as blood trickled from her mouth, realizing at that moment that she had let her guard down and that she desperately needed to use her healing ability. The Emperor continued his cold speech, saying he did not trust any oath she might take, and that he had no need for other immortals besides himself, which was why she had to die. The surrounding nobles joined in mocking her, and the Emperor warned her against even thinking of searching for water, as he knew well that her healing powers required pure water to activate. One of the advisors commented gloatingly that the greatest doctor of the East seemed completely helpless against a surprise attack, adding that he had expected this result since the moment that lowly Easterner dared to speak of wishes. Despite her severe injury, a defiant smile formed on her lips as she thought of what another advisor had said about this being the consequence of not knowing her true fate and status. She surprised the stunned Emperor by warning him to pay attention to his hair, which provoked and confused him. Then she revealed the secret he had hidden, that he had secretly commissioned her to create a cure for hair loss. And she mocked him, saying his corruption had reached such a point that even his own hair refused to be associated with him. The Emperor was struck with panic and intense embarrassment, ordering those present not to look at him while desperately denying her claim, but in her mind she called him a bald fraud. Hyuk Bai-woo continued to reveal her cards, telling him that she had secretly met with representatives of 3 kingdoms the previous day, and that they had all shown great interest in obtaining the Elixir of Immortality. Terror gripped the hearts of the attendees when she explained that she had informed those kingdoms that the elixir would be presented to the imperial family, hinting that this might drive them to do anything to get it. The Emperor flew into a rage when he realized her actions meant an inevitable war was imminent. He screamed at her, calling her an evil woman, while she staggered from the severity of her wound. As her body reached the brink of collapse, she lay on the ground, realizing that this was the end. Thoughts of her life raced through her mind, how she thought her extraordinary genius would change her fate, only to realize in the end that working alone was futile. She wondered if the outcome would have been different if she hadn't been alone, if there had been someone to support and back her on her journey. She closed her eyes, lamenting her failure in this life as well. With her final breaths, she bid everyone farewell, sincerely wishing for them all to die miserably in the midst of the war she had ignited. She remembered one last thing, revealing with a sarcastic smile that the elixir of immortality she had provided was nothing but a fake deception. Suddenly, a sharp, childish cry erupted from her. As time had rewound her amidst a whirlpool of mechanical gears, she woke up to find herself a young child again in her bed, possessed by anger, mourning her failure once more. What pained her more was the realization that this failure meant she had to live another 20 years in this body. She began to recall the reason for her existence in this strange world, realizing that everything she was going through was due to being summoned into the events of a novel her friend was obsessed with. That friend would not stop talking about child-rearing novels, and she had talked about this specific novel until she was tired of hearing about it. One day she woke up to find herself trapped in this novel world, wondering angrily why this curse had befallen her and not her friend. The title of that Eastern-style novel was The Child Pharmacist is a Master Chef Too. Its events revolve around the protagonist, Hyuk Ayan, who has the ability to heal people through cooking. With her extraordinary talent, she was able to capture the hearts of many and save countless lives. In the end, she even managed to cure her father's terminal illness. While she was lost in these thoughts, remembering that there was a secret behind the protagonist's ability, her distraction was interrupted by the teacher's voice asking her to pay attention. The teacher interrupted her, asking her to focus on the lesson. She felt bored and annoyed, thinking to herself that this was the fourth time she had lived through this situation. It was understandable to be born here the first time she possessed the character, but she didn't understand why she regressed to the age of 3 every time she died, which made repeating this beginning very exhausting and tedious. The teacher explained that the reason for their meeting today was to test their ability to use the family's power. He mentioned that those who showed superior talent would receive special benefits from the main family, but before the test, he would start with a brief history lesson. The teacher began by explaining that the continent they lived on was divided into 2 main parts: the Eastern Continent and the Western Continent. While the Eastern Continent sanctified the sky, wind, nature, and water, the Western Continent sanctified the earth and fire. He pointed out that the ancestors of their great family, the Hyuk family, were mysterious individuals who crossed from the Eastern Continent, that land protected by dragons that worship the sky and nature, to the Western's continent. Because of the dragon's blessing, the people of the Eastern Continent possess abilities related to nature, such as water, wind, lightning, plants, and others. But the greatest ability, which no other can match, is the extraordinary power of healing. The first head of the family, Hyuk Awa, used this healing power to save the emperor's life during a plague and was granted a noble title in return. Thus, they settled in the Baihu Empire and established the ancient Hyuk dynasty of pharmacists and doctors. The teacher finished the lesson, emphasizing that this was their ancient family history, while she thought to herself that every time they hid an ideological brainwashing process under the guise of a history lesson. Then he announced the start of the test, asking the children to focus on the tools placed before them. In front of each child was a cup of water, a fan, and a mineral ore, and they had to choose what they preferred. She noticed with surprise that they had actually used pure water this time. Finally, the teacher explained that they had to use those tools to treat the patient assigned to each of them, revealing a room full of bedridden patients. She realized that these patients were nothing but people brought from the slums to be test subjects. Terror struck the other children upon seeing the patients, and they began screaming and crying, calling for their fathers and mothers and wanting to return to their homes. She approached the patient assigned to her and noticed that he was in great pain, suffering from severe bed sores and a pungent smell of pus. She was possessed by anger at the cruelty of this family that tasked children with treating patients in critical condition, only to discover those with abilities among them, wondering what sin the children or the patients had committed to deserve this treatment. Despite her intense indignation at this cursed family, she suppressed her rage. One of the supervisors tried to force her to sit, warning her not to get up, but Hyuk Bai-woo did not care. Her only concern was to finish this test, which puzzled the supervisor. She dipped her hands into the bowl of pure water, determined to end this whole affair. Suddenly, a massive aquatic power exploded from the water containers around her and flowed throughout the room, astonishing those present. While the water swirled around her, she summoned her true identity in this world. She is Hyuk Bai-woo, the cousin of the original protagonist, the family's hidden genius, possessor of special abilities, and a skilled pharmacist. She remembered her friend's description of this character in the novel. It was said that she was a child who enjoyed extraordinary talent and beauty, but she was also very fragile, and her fate was to die in the prime of her youth, just like a butterfly. Despite this inevitable fate, she was confident when she first possessed this body that she would be able to survive. The reason for her confidence was her full knowledge of the novel's events from beginning to end. Thanks to her talkative friend, she had memorized every detail by heart. But despite all her knowledge, she had met her death in all 3 of her previous lives. In her first life, she showed her genius early on, but without anyone to support her, she was exploited as a family servant, and her life ended when she was killed by a rampaging patient. In her second life, she decided to hide her genius, believing that excellence could be poisonous, and live diligently, but died falling from a cliff with an unconscious patient she tried to stop from harming himself. In her third life, she had enough and decided she could no longer bear this situation. She abandoned the original story, and that cursed family, remembering the existence of a treasure in the imperial palace, said to grant wishes. She resolved to obtain that treasure and return to her original world, but this path led to her death again at the hands of the crown prince, whom she described as a bald bastard, after she succeeded in becoming the greatest doctor in the empire. Through this bitter experience, she realized an important truth. She realized that the hatred and discrimination rooted in the bones of this empire against Eastern immigrants were not something she could overcome alone, no matter how hard she tried. She needed allies and a power base of her own, and she would only find this power in her family, the Hyuk family. With this new realization, she returned her focus to the test. She already knew that all these patients were suffering from an epidemic fever. She had witnessed this situation 4 times before, and there was no longer any need for diagnosis. She knew the treatment well, which was mixing a certain root with dried herbs, and using her ability, she began preparing the medicine. The water in her hands turned into a glowing golden liquid. Then this healing liquid flowed toward the patients, entering their mouths and healing their wounds instantly before the eyes of the stunned supervisors. The golden healing liquid spread throughout the room, reaching every patient lying on their bed. The patients began to regain consciousness one by one, their faces filled with astonishment as they discovered that their wounds had healed and the fever that afflicted them had completely vanished. Hyuk Bai-woo turned to the supervisor and asked if what she had done was enough, but the supervisor, struck by shock, could only ask her to slow down and wait. The supervisor called her by her formal title, Lady Hyuk Bai-woo, while the child walked away with confident steps. As she walked through the vast palace, its sheer size amazed her, and she appeared awestruck as she took in her surroundings. The palace was incredibly massive, stretching over an enormous area that almost rivaled an entire village. She wondered what kind of palace could be this huge. She felt exhausted, realizing that her small body could not endure wandering in a place of this capacity. She recalled in her mind information about the family head and her current superior, her grandmother, Hyuk Moran, who had 5 sons and 3 daughters. But fate was lying in wait for this family. One of her daughters and one of her sons died, while another son disappeared under mysterious circumstances, leaving only 3 sons and 2 daughters. Unfortunately, the 3 remaining sons were afflicted with terminal illnesses and became confined to the east wing of the palace. One of these 6 sons was her father, and the other was the father of the story's protagonist, Hyuk Ayan. It was natural for these great warriors, who were once famous for their strength, to end up bedridden after being exhausted by incurable diseases. The Hyuk family was slowly crumbling and heading toward ruin and disappearance. For this reason, the family head was feverishly seeking a genius to lead the family and save it from its fate, holding periodic tests gathering everyone, from distant relatives and illegitimate children to detained children like her. But Hyuk Bai-woo knew from her previous experiences that no matter how distinguished a person's performance in these tests was, it was impossible to catch the family head's attention. The aunts who controlled family affairs from behind the scenes intentionally withheld information secretly to exclude any potential competitors for their children. She realized that what happened in her previous life would repeat itself, so she decided there was no need to take the hard road again, and that the best way was to follow the path of the original story. But there was an obstacle. The protagonist, Hyuk Ayan, was only 2 years old and could not help her at the moment. This meant she had to pave the way herself first. Her new plan required removing the obstacles from the protagonist's path so she could shine and sparkle. She had to make her the head of the family as soon as possible. In this way, she was confident she would get another chance to enter the Imperial Palace with her, and then she would be able to obtain the treasure and return to her original world. To achieve this, she had to find a certain person first and foremost. While she was lost in her thoughts, she tripped over something and fell on her face in pain. She held her nose, feeling pain and dizziness. When she raised her head, she found herself in front of a handsome man lying on the ground, and he was the one she had tripped over. She realized at that moment that she had found the one she was looking for, the youngest son among the 3 brothers confined in the East Wing. He was her uncle, and the father of the novel's protagonist, Hyuk Barang. She approached him and tried to wake him, shaking him gently while calling him uncle, and when he didn't respond, she slapped his cheek hard. She repeated her attempts to wake him by slapping him over and over, but he didn't budge an inch. Rather, it was her small hand that finally pained her. She realized his condition was more serious than she expected. The reason for his sleeping in the middle of the hallway wasn't because he enjoyed sleeping on the floor. He was suffering from an advanced case of narcolepsy and sleepwalking, to the point where living his daily life became impossible. And this was the terminal illness that afflicted her first patient in this life, her uncle. Despair possessed her as she saw that he did not respond even after she struck him in this manner. She looked at her reddened palm with resentment. She wondered if his body was made of steel, as the pain in her palm was increasing instead of him waking up. She decided to treat herself first, so she took out a bottle and poured water into a small bowl. She had to treat herself first. She used her first ability, self-healing using water, where the water surrounded her hand and began treating it. But this ability required extremely pure water to work. She felt better immediately, but she remembered with regret that this healing method only worked for herself. But that was okay, as she possessed a second ability. She returned her focus to the most important problem at the moment, how to wake her uncle from this deep slumber. It seemed clear that he would not wake up easily, but she did not intend to give up. This was her 4th life. She was determined not to waste a single day, and this would be her last attempt. She gathered all her strength and delivered another resounding slap to him, but even this attempt failed. Suddenly, her uncle grabbed her wrist firmly. Then he lifted her away from him, holding her by her clothes. Finally, her attempt began to bear fruit as he started stirring and yawning. Her uncle said mockingly that it was the first time he had been subjected to such an assassination attempt. He continued holding her by her clothes and asked her who she was. She remembered at that moment her friend's words in her previous world describing the novel's protagonist as a princess. She also remembered her description of her uncle as having a terrifying tongue, while her uncle was asking her if she wanted to die. His grip on her clothes tightened until she almost choked. She screamed at him with difficulty, identifying herself as Hyuk Bai-woo and calling him a fool. He was shocked by her audacity, screaming in anger, unable to believe she had called him a fool. but suddenly he realized who she was, wondering if she was the daughter of his second brother, as she looked exactly like her mother. When he let her go, she coughed heavily, feeling angry, wondering what kind of treatment this was for a 3-year-old child, and how this situation made her hate this novel 20% more. Then her uncle asked her if she was the little butterfly, and she appeared confused, repeating the word butterfly in bewilderment. Hyuk Bai-woo was surprised, wondering why everyone, from her friend to her uncle, insisted on calling her the butterfly. She wondered if there was a link between her and butterflies in the settings of this novel, as she had never heard of such fine details before. She ignored the matter and addressed her uncle, asking him why he was sleeping alone in the hallway. He claimed stutteringly that the weather was beautiful, but she called him a liar in her mind. She added that he couldn't even eat properly because of his narcolepsy attacks, and that his sleepwalking condition had worsened to the point where he sent his daughter to live in the West Wing. All this while, he had locked himself in the East Wing. The deserted East Wing was designated for exiles, unlike the West Wing, which housed the administration and the main family buildings. This wing was the refuge for the family head's 3 sons suffering from incurable diseases. Among its residents were also Hyuk Bai-woo and one of her cousins. She remembered that of these 3, only one was cured by the protagonist, Hyuk Ayan, after 10 years had passed. As for the rest, including her father, they died before then, and although this would happen after a long time, she did not have the luxury of waiting. This was the core problem. She could not wait a full 10 years. She needed to obtain the imperial treasure as soon as possible. She sat in front of him and suggested they cooperate together since their interests were mutual. Then she whispered to him that she would tell him a secret no one else knew. She told him simply and confidently that she was a genius. He looked at her disdainfully and asked, "So what?" Then told her to go talk her nonsense somewhere else. She was not affected by his coldness. Instead, she dropped her next bomb, wondering if he would maintain his stance even if she told him she could cure his illness. He was shocked by her words and asked her in amazement what she had just said. She repeated her words with a confident smile, assuring him that she was capable of curing the disease that everyone failed to heal. This was the kind of genius she possessed. He looked at her skeptically as if she were crazy, which she noticed from his facial expressions. She didn't blame him for his reaction. It was natural for him to doubt her words after meeting countless doctors and pharmacists who failed to treat him, but she knew things would become annoying if he treated her like one of them. She took out her bottle again and told him he would see for himself and believe when he tried it. Before he could process what was happening, she unleashed her power and water exploded from the bottle, surrounding him from all sides. He screamed at her, asking what was happening. She told him she would show him herself. She revealed to him her second ability, the one that enabled her to become the greatest doctor in the Empire in her 3rd life. While the water was diagnosing his condition, she asked him to stay silent, mockingly wondering if this was the first time he had undergone such a diagnosis. She reminded him that he should be used to water, as he is a water ability user, but he denied it angrily, calling her words nonsense. But her attention was drawn to a bruise on her body. He then remembered that when he woke up earlier, he thought she was an assassin, which was why he didn't hesitate to use his strength against her. He wondered how this little girl endured his attack without even screaming. During the diagnosis, water bubbles began displaying images and information about his health, much to the astonishment of Hyuk Bai-woo herself, who described what was happening as utter madness. A complex network of information appeared before her, and she wondered about the massive amount of medicine her uncle would need to take. This was her second ability, the power to diagnose patients and create medicine through water. If the disease was one she had treated before, she could create the medicine immediately as long as the ingredients were available, just as she did in the test. But if the disease was new to her, she could determine the ingredients and the prescription necessary for treatment through diagnosis. Thanks to surviving 3 previous lives, she had built a massive database of diseases. This meant she could treat most diseases immediately, but her uncle's disease was a special case. The number 263 appeared before him in a huge water bubble, and she realized then why the original story described his illness as terminal or a curse. He needed more medicine than any dying patient. But fortunately, the initial medicine was simple, and she was confident in her ability to treat him if she had the time and necessary ingredients. When the diagnosis ended and the water faded, her uncle looked at her in shock, whispering weakly, "What the hell is this?" She tried to explain the nature of his illness, but he interrupted, her angrily, blocking his ears and refusing to listen. She wondered in bewilderment why he refused while she was trying to help him, and told him his constant sleep wasn't normal. But he insisted he just slept a lot, and that this wasn't a disease. Angrily, he told her to return to the main house if she had such abilities instead of hanging around this place. So she called him a stubborn old man in her mind, adding that she was used to his kind. She faced him again, questioning the reason for his continued denial of his illness. He put his hand on his head in despair and told her he had been a pharmacist and doctor for many years. He had seen many patients, and most of the doctors who visited him left without being able to do anything. He finally admitted he was sick but refused to listen to her diagnosis. He screamed at her that he was tired of hearing that his cursed disease couldn't be treated, but Hyuk Bai-woo did not give up and warned him calmly that he would regret it if he didn't listen to her. He continued in his stubbornness, mockingly commenting on her audacity and repeating that he would not listen, but she was not affected. Suddenly, she gave up and told him not to listen to her, which surprised him. The uncle was surprised by her giving up so easily, while she was thinking that she wanted him on her side, but she didn't expect it to happen this quickly. She realized he had become sensitive after his long suffering with the disease, so she decided to suffice with seeing his face today and go back. She bid him farewell, saying she would see him next time, but he told her to return to her father. Then he warned her against telling his second brother about what happened between them. As he walked away, she began counting in her mind. 3, 2, 1. And as soon as she finished the count, he fell to the ground. Unconscious again, she remembered that her friend once described him as a sleeping prince, but she thought sarcastically that he was more like a stubborn damn uncle. She looked at the bruise on her arm and smiled cunningly. Hyuk Bai-woo looked at the bruise on her arm and decided to leave it for a little longer, then left, determined to make some medicine. Meanwhile, her uncle Barang woke up and felt annoyance and lethargy overwhelming him instead of refreshment. He wondered in bewilderment how long he had spent sleeping this time. He knew that his body, blessed by dragons, was stronger than most people's bodies, and that he could stay alive without food even while sleeping, but this was the most this blessing could offer him. He felt his time was being wasted and thrown away like trash, all the ordinary days, the times he spent with friends, and even the time he should devote to his only daughter. All of that was being lost from him. His child, whom he had once held in his arms, had grown up now and was supposed to be able to call him father. His thoughts were interrupted by Hyuk Bai-woo's voice shouting, "Uncle," at him. He found her shaking him and trying to wake him by slapping his face, warning him that his face would become crooked if he continued sleeping on the floor. He woke up slowly, muttering angrily, while she was shouting with joy because he had finally woken up. He asked her angrily how she kept finding him in places like this, to which she answered simply that she had lived here for years. So how could she not find him? He grumbled, saying that even his eldest brother didn't dare disturb him while he was sleeping, yet this child came to him every day. He bitterly recalled the memory of his eldest brother and how he used to comfort him, saying it wasn't his fault. He used to tell him that the guilt wasn't his, but rather it was just... He looked at the bruise on Hyuk Bai-woo's arm. Then he exploded in anger, thinking to himself that she was a healer but couldn't even heal her own hand. Finally, he gave up and asked her what she wanted him to do. Hyuk Bai-woo took a small bottle out of her bag and presented it to him. She told him with a bright smile that this was his medicine. He looked at her skeptically and asked if she wanted him to drink medicine made by an uneducated, unlicensed amateur, but she insisted he try it. He asked her sarcastically if she intended to poison him, to which she met his question with another, wondering indignantly if he would actually drink it, even if she admitted it was poison. He replied to her with an apathy dominated by despair, declaring his lack of desire to live anyway and asking her to give it to him, confirming his readiness to die for her. But he was lying. He wondered to himself how he could die and leave his precious daughter behind. Hyuk Bai-woo interrupted him seriously, warning him that death is easier than he thinks. She told him he shouldn't talk about death so recklessly. She reminded him that they were, after all, a family that saves people's lives. She began to list the details of his condition with startling accuracy, saying his first symptoms appeared 12 years ago when he collapsed during a gathering at the main house. She continued, explaining that now, when he sleeps, he stays asleep for 3 or even 5 consecutive days, while his waking hours do not exceed 1 hour a day. She warned him that the symptoms would worsen and that this would happen faster if he didn't eat properly. She finished her speech by saying this was what she reached through her diagnosis of his condition. Then she offered him the medicine again, asking him to take it and assuring him he had nothing to lose from trying. Hyuk Bai-woo told him confidently that she knew he was worried because he had only dealt with quack doctors so far, but she was different. She asked him to trust her, reminding him that she told him she was skilled at treating people. Hyuk Barang remembered Hyuk Bai-woo's mother's words as she told him he should trust her, calling him Little Master, adding that her treatment was the best of all. Her uncle hesitated for a moment, then reached his hand toward the bottle and asked her to give it to him. Hyuk Bai-woo was surprised, as she thought he would continue refusing today as well, and her uncle wondered why she was carrying something the size of her body, to which she told him this was the only container she had. He agreed reluctantly on the condition that she stop bothering him if he drank the medicine, and she agreed enthusiastically. He took the bottle and swallowed its contents in one go. She thought to herself with relief that she managed to make the medicine in advance thanks to the existence of a deserted herb garden in the East Wing. But as soon as he swallowed the medicine, he felt an extremely foul taste, so he spat out what remained in his mouth in disgust. He asked her angrily about the taste of this thing and what she put in it, but she ignored his anger and asked him coldly if he had finished the whole dose. She offered him a piece of candy to calm him down, but he refused it, shouting. He accused her of trying to poison him, but she thought to herself that he was overreacting. The dragon's blessing made him more resistant to poisons than anyone else, and she reminded him that good medicine is always bitter. She bid him farewell and left, but he called her angrily, asking her to return and explain what happened. From that day on, Hyuk Bai-woo began chasing him everywhere, carrying the medicine and insisting that he take it. She would appear to him at every corner, demanding that he drink his medicine before he went anywhere. Her regular phrase became, "Uncle, it's time for your medicine." He would swallow the medicine every day feeling disgusted. One day, after he took his dose, she offered him a piece of candy, but he refused it as usual. She bid him farewell, saying she would see him tomorrow, then she left. He remained sitting, contemplating her as she walked away, wondering in bewilderment what this child was planning. He thought that children usually ask adults to play with them or read stories to them, but this child didn't care about anything except forcing him to take medicine. What was stranger was that she never mentioned her father, but he realized his second brother, her father, wasn't in a condition to care for her anyway. He sighed in despair and decided to forget the matter. He could barely take care of himself, so how could he worry about anyone else? But the feeling of guilt haunted him every time he saw the bruises that hadn't faded yet on her small wrist, which made him not even dare to drive her away. He felt restless and thought that this child had really started to get on his nerves. As he was walking in the hallway, he suddenly realized he wasn't sleeping. He wondered in surprise how much time had passed. And had he stayed awake for more than 2 hours recently? He remembered he woke up at 2 in the afternoon, and now the clock indicated 5 in the evening. He realized the medicine had started to take effect, so he muttered with light anger, calling her, "That damn kid." While Hyuk Bai-woo was wandering in the herb garden, she felt a strange sensation, as if someone was talking about her. She wondered if that was just an illusion, then shook her head to ignore the matter. She held some medicinal herbs, and thought that, as she expected, it was difficult to find good herbs in the neglected East Wing garden. Since they were a family of healers, there were patches of herbs scattered throughout the East Wing, but they were completely neglected due to being deserted for a long time. She could manage the second batch of medicine with what was available, but after that, she would have to go to the market to buy the necessary ingredients. This meant leaving the walls of the Hyuk family estate. She knew that one of the 3 largest medicine markets in the empire was located just outside these walls, but she needed a guardian to leave the estate, and she wondered if her uncle would agree to accompany her. For although he started staying awake for longer periods, she wasn't sure if he would be strong enough for a trip to the market. But anyway, it was time for her uncle to realize that the medicine she was offering him was effective. At that moment, she heard an angry voice calling her, "Kid!" She turned to find her uncle running toward her in anger, and terror possessed her as she thought that if he caught her, her fate would be death. She started running to escape from him, but he caught up with her, shouting and asking why she was running. She answered him while panting that she was running because he was chasing her fiercely. He denied that he was chasing her, and in a quick movement, he stood in front of her. She screamed, warning him that they would collide, but he caught her in the air with lightness and skill. With a smile etched on his face, he pointed out his success in catching and securing her this time, boastfully asking if he had really done it safely. But she started coughing heavily, which raised his concern. He asked her worriedly if she was okay, to which she answered angrily that she ran suddenly and couldn't catch her breath, adding that her health wasn't good. After she calmed down a little, she asked him why he came looking for her suddenly. He smiled broadly. Then he held her by her shoulders and asked her eagerly what she had fed him. She realized with joy that he had finally noticed the effect of the medicine. She was overwhelmed with happiness because she had finally succeeded in winning his trust. Not just anyone, but the father of the novel's protagonist. This was a huge step forward, and she was confident that things would go smoothly from now on, so she turned to him and asked him to listen to her story. But before she could finish her sentence, she saw his eyes lose their luster. She looked at him in amazement as he collapsed onto the grass. He had fallen into a deep sleep once again. Despair overwhelmed her as she cried out at him in indignation, wondering if he was joking with her, expressing her shock at his falling asleep at this specific time, and at the moment when events were about to develop and move forward. On that day, the cry of Hyuk Bai-woo, filled with oppression, echoed throughout the East Wing. Hyuk Bai-woo sighed in despair, wondering why he had to fall asleep at that exact crucial moment, for it was said that misfortunes never come alone. She realized she had no other choice but to move forward on her own, even though she had hoped her uncle would accompany her. She headed toward the home of her eldest uncle, the eldest of the 3 confined brothers and another patient living in the East Wing. She knew the main hall in the West Wing housed the skilled doctors, pharmacists, and the warriors guarding them. Alongside them were the cousins, the family head, and the aunts, all people she had to surpass one day. To face them, she first had to control the East Wing, which meant winning over the patients held. There to her side, the 3 brothers were the clan's best fighters before their illness, always competing for first and second place. If she could convince just 2 of them to help her, her path would become much easier. While walking lost in thought, she collided with someone and fell in pain, wondering why she kept bumping into things. The boy she hit raised his head and asked who she was. She recognized him immediately by his unkempt hair. It was her eldest cousin, Hyuk Gai-won. She greeted him with a smile, introducing herself as Bai-woo, but he mispronounced her name. She corrected her name for him, then asked if he was Gai-won, and he was surprised at how she knew his name. She told him they were cousins, that his father was her father's elder brother, and added that she came specifically to see him. He asked coldly why she came to see him. Gai-won asked if she too had come to pick a fight. He thought perhaps, since her father was also bedridden, they might find comfort as comrades in suffering. Hyuk Bai-woo noticed the venom in his words. but she understood his position, as some caregivers become just as sensitive as the patients they tend to, especially someone like Hyuk Gae-won, who had been nursing his father alone since age 5. She remembered her father was sick too, but pushed the thought aside, refusing to think about it now. He interrupted her thoughts, saying he had nothing to discuss and asking her to leave. She tried to stop him, but he said he was busy and had no time for her eldest uncle's affairs. He said sharply that her father's illness was her responsibility alone. He left her standing there, so she thought of his cruelty, especially since she came specifically to treat his father. She sighed in despair and decided to return later, realizing she couldn't face the dangerous eldest uncle without Gae-won or her other uncle by her side. As she walked away, she heard a voice mocking Gae-won, saying his devotion to his father was truly a sight to behold. The bully wondered if he was still persistent in this futile care and that it was time to give it up. She recognized the voice immediately. It was her eldest aunt's son, Hyuk Dae-wi, mocking Gae-won and calling his father insane. She looked at him in disgust, thinking how he dared say that. She didn't expect to run into him here again. She remembered that the Hyuk children are given 2 paths, either to become doctors and pharmacists who heal others, or warriors who protect them. But Hyuk Dae-wi, despite lacking talent in both paths, used the eldest aunt's influence and seized every opportunity available to him. Hyuk Bai-woo recalled that her third life was particularly ridiculous, then reflected that the whole life was strange in many ways. First, the protagonist Hyuk Ayan suddenly became cautious. Then the grandmother, the family head, died early, followed by the eldest aunt who inherited the position shortly after. And finally, Hyuk Dae-wi became the head of the Hyuk family. She remembered her confrontation with him, how he asked mockingly if she truly thought leaving the family would change anything, and that she was nothing but his puppet. The family led by this bastard interfered in her affairs at every turn. When she reached the edge, she planned to destroy the entire Hyuk family herself, but in the end, the family didn't fall by her hand. It fell by someone else's hand, her cousin, Hyuk Gae-won. In the original story, Gae-won was supposed to be imprisoned early for his brutal attack on Dae-wi's followers. Because of that, the eldest uncle died quickly as his condition worsened without proper care. After that, the protagonist comforted the grieving Gae-won, who regretted his father's death and took him as her companion. But in her third life, Hyuk Ayan disappeared, causing the story to derail completely. At that time, she was too busy trying to escape the family to notice anything else, but realized there must be a clear reason for her third life's sharp deviation from the original story, and she had to think about this in her current life too. Her thoughts were interrupted by Gae-won's voice ordering Hyuk Dae-wi to stop picking fights and get lost. Hyuk Dae-wi provoked him, telling him to look at his face and asking mockingly if he wanted to punch him, inciting him to actually try and do it. Dae-wi thought to himself that he would see how far the madness of this bastard's son could go. Hyuk Bai-woo noticed the situation and realized if left alone, things would turn bad. If it turned into a violent incident, Gae-won, who had no support, would clearly be the one punished. She couldn't let him end up in prison again in this life. She screamed at them, pouring out her rage and calling them fools and brainless. She jumped toward them, calling out to her brother, whom she described as a future genius, asking him to wait and proudly declaring that his world-class doctor sister was coming to save him. She arrived panting and scolded them for ganging up on one person. She was suffering the side effects of her fast sprint. Dae-wi asked disdainfully, "Who is this little brat?" And one of his followers said he knew her. He explained she was the daughter of Lord Hyuk Bai-ho, one of the 3 brothers exiled to the East Wing, adding he heard he had once married a woman with colored eyes and purple hair. Dae-wi's sarcastic laughter rang out, asking mockingly if there was a gathering of patients there that day. At that moment, Gae-won stepped forward and stood in front of Hyuk Bai-woo, asking her to step aside because it was dangerous and telling her he would handle things from here. She smiled secretly, knowing he was faking being tough but was actually kind-hearted. She told him she had a plan and asked him to cover his mouth and jump back when she counted to 3. She began counting to 3, then threw some fruit she had picked onto the ground. Gae-won jumped and covered his mouth, while the others began coughing and choking from the smoke emitted by the fruits. Hyuk Bai-woo remarked with surprise that she asked him to jump back, but he practically flew, adding that a good assistant is one with quick wit. Hyuk Dae-wi screamed while coughing, telling his followers not to panic as these were just pirate fruits. Hyuk Bai-woo wondered mockingly if this was what they meant by saying, "Even rotten fish still has value." Then she spat the plant that was in her mouth onto the ground. She explained in a haughty tone that this fruit is used as a primary fuel for smoke bombs in these parts, but she added she doubted they knew this part. Gae-won noticed the smoke's color changing and became worried. Hyuk Bai-woo remarked that mixing the stem sap with the fruit turns the smoke into toxic smoke. Dae-wi's followers began feeling stomach pains and intense itching. Dae-wi screamed at her angrily, asking who she was and what she had done to them. She asked him with an innocent smile how he felt. He attacked her while screaming, calling her a little bug the size of a rat, but Gae-won intervened just in time and stopped him. Then he kicked him hard in the stomach, causing him to fall. His followers looked in shock as they saw their master Hyuk Dae-wi on the ground. Gae-won ordered them to take him and leave, threatening them with the same fate if they didn't go. The followers carried their collapsed master telling him to hold on. Hyuk Bai-woo called to them from afar, telling them if they wanted an antidote, they should choose some pink shepherd's purse. Gaiwan turned to her and asked worriedly if she was okay. Hyuk Bai-woo remembered he must have been shaken by the situation as well. She thought that no matter how composed he seemed, he was still a 9-year-old child, and decided to reassure him, so she told him she was fine. But before she finished her sentence, blood began to trickle from her mouth. Gaiwan panicked when he saw the blood, holding her and asking worriedly if she was also sick. She thought to herself that this wasn't entirely wrong, as she had also been hit by the toxic mist earlier, but she thought this was nothing and that she could heal herself with just water. Suddenly, Gaiwan grabbed his sleeve and began wiping the blood off her face forcefully. She screamed in surprise, asking what he was doing, and he told her she was hit by toxic mist and wiping it was the basic procedure. He continued rubbing her face, saying he noticed her symptoms were different from the others, and that she must have been sick from the start. Otherwise, she would be living in the main building like her younger cousin. She screamed internally, denying it, saying Hyuk Ayan showed amazing powers since birth, while she had no such powers. He held her face and told her to sniff, so she wondered why she should sniff. She screamed in pain from his forceful rubbing, thinking this body had self-healing abilities. After things settled, Hyuk Gaiwan sat with Hyuk Bai-woo to understand what happened, asking if she said she had a healing ability. She confirmed this, explaining she was treating their youngest uncle and his condition was improving, and that she came to him to treat his father too. She thought to herself that if her uncle were awake, things would be a bit easier, but he was completely useless at that moment. Gaiwan said he understood everything despite it being hard to believe, but he still couldn't let her meet his father. She asked in bewilderment why, wondering if he didn't trust her skills. He denied it, explaining the reason wasn't a lack of trust. He told her his father was currently in the berserk stage. In this state, only the hunting instinct remains, and his illness turns into a malady that destroys everything around him. Hyuk Bai-woo explained that her uncle Hyuk Bai-won was particularly dangerous when he had killing intent. She heard he was an amazing warrior before his illness, possessing lightning abilities, and the imperial family was desperate to include him in their ranks. Gaiwan explained his father's illness goes through 2 distinct stages, the normal stage and the berserk stage. In the normal stage, he lives naturally, but in the berserk stage, he isolates himself in the storehouse. Therefore, he promised her he would let her meet him when the berserk stage ended and he stabilized. Hyuk Bai-woo accepted reluctantly, realizing it was frustrating but unavoidable. She agreed to return when the berserk stage ended. As she was about to leave, Gaiwan called her and asked her to wait. He suggested she stay with him instead of leaving. She was surprised by his offer, but he added he would take care of her. Hyuk Bai-woo wondered about his offer, questioning if he still misunderstood and thought she was sick, even though she wasn't. He told her he understood, as his father denied his illness at first too, but she insisted she wasn't sick. He told her staying alone was dangerous and that Hyuk Dae-wai wouldn't let today's incident pass easily. He was certain he would definitely return for revenge. Therefore, for her safety, he asked her to stay with him until then, considering it repayment for her helping him earlier. He reached his hand toward her, and suddenly a ball of lightning energy appeared in his palm, which amazed her. He confessed to her that he was an ability user too, but asked her to keep it a secret. Hyuk Bai-woo realized that in the Hyuk family, all children who show powers or signs of them are supposed to be raised in the main house. This meant Gaiwan had been hiding his powers all this time so he could care for his father, unlike the original story where his powers awakened in prison. Gaiwan told her that if she hadn't intervened in his confrontation with Daiwi's gang, things wouldn't have ended this way. He added that if he were punished, his father would certainly be sad, so he asked her to consider his offer a way of giving back. Hyuk Bai-woo thought he was saying commendable things, then he added it would be better for her to live with him, rather than living in the pigsty she currently resided in. Hyuk Bai-woo resented Gaiwan's description of her room as a pigsty and asked angrily what he meant, but she couldn't deny her room was indeed messy. Thus, she ended up staying in Gaiwan's unexpectedly comfortable residence. She was enjoying a delicious meal he prepared for her. She discovered he was not only skilled in martial arts, but his domestic skills were top tier as well. He brought water at dawn, prepared meals, and made medical tonics. He was truly an excellent caregiver. Above all, she hadn't had a warm meal like this in a long time, as she had been living on grass until now. The maids in her father's house weren't stingy with ingredients, but all the food went directly to her father's place, and she had no desire to go there. In fact, she had no intention of ever going there. She interrupted him while eating and asked when she could meet his father. He thought for a moment, then told her he should be fine today. Happiness overwhelmed her. Finally, she would meet her uncle, Hyuk Bai-won. They headed toward the secluded storehouse in a sunny field. They found a red ribbon tied at the entrance, and Gaiwan told her this was the signal he agreed upon with his father. He explained that this ribbon meant his father had regained consciousness. Hyuk Bai-woo felt relieved. She remembered meeting Hyuk Bai-won in her first life. His madness was at its peak, in the worst possible state. This was the first time she saw him in full possession of his mental faculties. Gaiwan pointed out he might be in the garden. Gaiwan spotted his father from afar and called out to him. Hyuk Bai-woo looked at him and saw a man with long black hair and red eyes. But she noticed a blood stain on the ground near his feet, which worried her. She felt something was strange about him. Suddenly, Hyuk Bai-woo realized his eyes were completely unfocused and that they were in trouble. Bai-won attacked them suddenly, and Gai-won screamed, warning her to avoid the attack. Gai-won grabbed her and carried her away from danger. Hyuk Bai-woo looked in horror at her uncle, who looked like a monster. She remembered her uncle in her previous life when he whispered weakly, asking them to flee. She saw horrific scenes of him killing people, but he tried to stay away from her at that moment. In the blink of an eye, Bai-won attacked again, but Gai-won grabbed her again, carried her on his shoulder, and began running away from his father at full speed. Gai-won asked her as he carried her and fled why she didn't use water attacks or anything like that, and she answered she couldn't. She poured out her rage internally, cursing her luck for being only a healer and telling herself if she had such power, the crown prince would have been the first victim of her killing blows. Meanwhile, Gai-won was wondering about his father's state. Gai-won wondered in bewilderment why his father's madness hadn't ended yet, as it was supposed to have ended long ago, and he was certain his father was the one who put the ribbon at the entrance. Hyuk Bai-woo asked him to calm down and listen to her carefully, explaining they needed medicine to deal with her uncle and that making medicine takes time. She asked him how many minutes he could hold out against his uncle, but he corrected her question to how many seconds. He replied he could only hold out for 30 seconds, so Hyuk Bai-woo realized this time was not enough at all, and began using her water healing ability. It was supposed to be a diagnostic ability, but she used it to restrict the rampaging uncle's movement. The water bound his entire body, much to his surprise and shock. Hyuk Bai-woo screamed at Gai-won, saying she couldn't hold out any longer. Despair possessed her, wishing her ability were more advanced, or if her other uncle were there to help her. Gai-won drew his sword, admitting he didn't have much confidence in his ability to face his father, as he hadn't been able to withstand him for more than 3 rounds before. But he added that thanks to the time she bought him, he was able to gather lightning energy and that he had no choice but to try. He jumped in the air and attacked his father with force. The two clashed in a flash of lightning. Hyuk Bai-woo was surprised that Gai-won was fighting better than she expected, but his father's strength was greater, and he succeeded in pushing him back. She wondered to herself if her uncle was going easy on him, but Bai-won dealt him a powerful blow that knocked him to the ground, and Hyuk Bai-woo screamed, his name in concern. Then Bai-won's attention turned toward her, which left her in shock and despair. Hyuk Bai-woo realized there was no way to avoid an attack of this magnitude. Gai-won screamed, calling his father. Hyuk Bai-woo closed her eyes, cursing her luck, wondering who would have thought her 4th life would end in record time, even though she succeeded in treating her uncle this time and thought things would be different. But suddenly, she heard a mocking voice asking if she shouldn't avoid a punch coming her way. She opened her eyes to find her other uncle, Barang, had stopped the attack. Barang woke up grumbling about the situation he found himself in. Hyuk Bai-woo called out to him in amazement, wondering how he came here, since according to his sleep cycle, he was supposed to stay asleep for 4 more days. He asked boastfully what she would have done if he hadn't come, commenting that his appearance at the right moment was wonderful. She spoke to herself, wondering what was wrong with that man and if he was a total narcissist. Bai-won growled in anger. Barang said confidently that she might not know it, but he was somewhat of an important figure. Then he unleashed his massive water power, which completely bound Bai-won. Hyuk Bai-woo noticed his water was completely different from hers. Hyuk Bai-woo realized her ability was just a medium for healing, while her uncle's ability was clearly oriented for combat, and wondered if this was Hyuk Barang, the clan's greatest water mage people always talked about. Barang cursed his bad luck, having to face his eldest brother at a time when he couldn't use his power properly, as water is very weak against lightning. He called to Hyuk Bai-woo and told her he couldn't hold out against his rampaging brother for long, and asked if there was a way to stop him. She answered in the affirmative and asked him to just buy her some time. Barang agreed immediately, confirming he just needed to hold out. Suddenly, Barang used his ability to protect Hyuk Bai-woo from a lightning attack Bai-won launched at her. Bai-won screamed in anger, and Hyuk Bai-woo wondered in amazement when her uncle managed to launch it. Barang told her medicine was impressive, but he added that he told her he wouldn't hold out for long. Hyuk Bai-woo called to Gai-won, reminding him that time was running out. She showed him a red flower and asked if he had seen anything like it before in the east side. He answered in the affirmative, so he carried her on his back and they set off quickly in the direction he pointed. They arrived at a garden full of toxic herbs, including poppies, and Hyuk Bai-woo wondered who was trying to make drugs or painkillers here. It looked like someone planted them intentionally. Hyuk Bai-woo used her water power again and called her uncle, asking him not to give up and to hold out a little longer. Barang remembered his eldest brother and how he was a good man before he fell ill, but Bai-won attacked him again, forcing him to dodge. Barang screamed angrily, asking if he wouldn't even give him a moment to remember the past, and if he was really trying to kill his younger brother. He groaned in pain, thinking how all the brothers ended up with such cursed diseases. He remembered the rumors that this was a disgrace to the Hyuk family, that it was impossible for 3 of the family head's sons to be afflicted with terminal illnesses like this, especially since they were the most prominent in martial arts. It was said this could be a harbinger of the family's decline, and that this affliction might pass to their children too. Someone wondered aloud if these diseases were hereditary. When Barang heard these words, he exploded in anger and asked the speaker what he just said. The man retreated in fear, claiming he was hallucinating. Barang remembered that moment when the man was screaming in his face, asking for forgiveness. When he left his daughter with someone he trusted and was confined in the East Wing, he didn't have much hope and thought he would deteriorate and die slowly in an endless sleep. But thanks to Hyuk Bai-woo, he saw a glimmer of hope that had faded. He was feeling slightly better, but his body was clearly recovering. He resolved to protect this lifeline. He screamed at his eldest brother, warning him that they would be the only losers if she died. Barang screamed at his eldest brother, reminding him that Hyuk Bai-woo looks like the genius who might be able to cure all their diseases. He pushed him away forcefully while asking him to wake up from his coma. Meanwhile, Hyuk Bai-woo arrived calling her uncle. Hyuk Bai-woo threw him a syringe she had prepared and asked him to catch it. He looked at the syringe in amazement, and she screamed in his face, asking him to jab it into an artery. He wondered in bewilderment which artery she meant and guessed she meant he should jab it into the neck. He ran toward his brother, dodged his attack, then managed to inject him in the neck. Bai-won fell unconscious immediately. Birang looked at what happened in a state of shock. Gai-won and Hyuk Bai-woo celebrated the success of their plan, while Barang wondered what this thing was that brought his eldest brother down so quickly. She told him proudly this was a sedative, strong enough to bring down 10 elephants. After that, they bound Bai-won as a precaution. Barang asked worriedly if this sedative was safe, and Hyuk Bai-woo assured him. She grumbled internally about his lack of trust, explaining it wasn't poison, and that she adjusted the dose to suit his extreme resistance. Thanking her luck, she treated her uncle first. Barang asked her how she could be so sure, and she answered simply because she was a genius. He grabbed her cheek, asking mockingly if she wanted to die, as this explained nothing at all. Gai-won intervened and asked his youngest uncle to let go of her cheek. Gai-won sighed and told his uncle he hadn't seen him in a long time, but before exchanging greetings, he had to say something. He began to scold his uncle, saying that Bai-woo is still a child and that acting recklessly toward her is unacceptable, as she is weaker than any normal child, and asked him to reflect on his behavior and lack of virtue. Barang grumbled, saying he was still doing a lot of scolding and that he sounded just like his eldest brother's wife, but Gai-won replied that he was the immature one. Meanwhile, Bai-won began to regain consciousness, wondering to himself if he had really died. When he saw Hyuk Bai-woo in front of him, he thought she was a cute little fairy appearing before his eyes before his death. On the other hand, Hyuk Bai-woo was contemplating him, realizing this was the first time she saw him not in a state of rage and that his appearance was completely different from what she imagined. Bai-won wondered while still bound if he was still alive. Both Barang and Gai-won reacted to his awakening. Barang asked if he was already awake, while Gai-won rushed to his father's side calling him. Gai-won asked his father if he was okay, and Bai-won reassured him, confirming he was fine. "My son." Bai-won noticed his son's teary eyes and teased him, telling him not to cry, and that his handsome father couldn't even pat his head now while bound. He continued his joking, saying he would tell his mother in the afterlife that her son cries a lot, but Gai-won begged him not to say such things. Explaining the situation this time was truly dangerous. Barang scolded his brother for his joking at this time, but Bai-won vaguely remembered a promise he made to his late wife, that she would kill him herself if he harmed anyone again. Then Bai-won turned to his younger brother and greeted him simply, which puzzled Barang. Bai-won wondered why he couldn't move his body, and his brother told him the reason was the sedative. Bai-won noticed that the sedative's effect this time was different from usual. Bai-won grumbled that his whole body was stiff and he couldn't move a single muscle, so Hyuk Bai-woo wondered to herself if he was always like this. She thought sarcastically that of course he couldn't move. If he could move after that dose, he would be a kind of super elephant, and realized this was the power of the body blessed by the dragon. For some residents of the eastern continent, like her eldest uncle, receive the blessing of the dragon, Yang, who is worshipped as a god in the east, and are born with bodies stronger and more durable twice as much as ordinary people. In the western continent, there is a similar blessing from the western dragon, where they worship their dragon as a god as well. The Hyuk family raises these people to become warriors. In a land full of discrimination, it was natural for warriors to protect doctors, but it was a privilege she never enjoyed. In fact, she truly had no one by her side. She remembered that in her third life, she made a friend with one person, but she shook her head and dismissed the thought, returning to think that both her uncles, the eldest and youngest, were excellent warriors, regardless of their illnesses. Therefore, establishing a positive relationship with them would be a great help in overcoming the upcoming trials. Her thoughts were interrupted by Bai-won's voice, wondering about the identity of this little fairy who had been here all this time. She greeted him and introduced herself as Bai-woo, Hyuk Bai-woo, but he mispronounced her name, so she corrected him, but he continued calling her Chirpy. He asked her why she was here. Before answering, she remembered she used the sedative on him and feared he would be angry with her if he found out. She knew the sedative she made was safe and had no side effects, but the family had been using harsh drugs on him all this time, so she feared he would misunderstand and get angry. She decided to remain silent for now, but Gai-won intervened enthusiastically and told his father that this child was the one who saved him. He explained she was his own cousin, that she made the sedative and stopped his rampage, and that she wanted to cure his disease. Hyuk Bai-woo was annoyed by Gaiwan's inability to keep his mouth shut. Bai-won wondered if this little fairy was indeed a fairy, then decided to give her that title. She politely asked him to stop calling her that, and he agreed reluctantly. He patted her head and thanked her for helping them. She asked him in surprise if he wasn't angry, and he was surprised by her question. He explained that thanks to her, he didn't harm anyone, though he wished he had turned Barong into grilled meat. So Barong screamed in his face, saying he should be grateful that he went easy on him. Bai-won added seriously that he might have harmed his son too, and that was what he feared most. He looked at her tenderly and told her she was his little savior. Hyuk Bai-woo felt strange. All her life, this family only looked at her as a tool to be used. This refreshing and uncalculated situation was strange to her. He asked if she really planned to treat him and Barong, and she answered in the affirmative. He said he was grateful for her feelings. But there was one thing he didn't understand. He asked her, "Why did you start with them?" He explained she had family closer to her than them, pointing to her father, Hyuk Bai-ho, which shocked her. He meant her father who lived in the East Wing. Hyuk Bai-woo remembered her father, Hyuk Bai-ho, who fell ill like his brothers and was locked in the East Wing. In the original story, he died early for an unknown reason, and she didn't intend to look for a father like that. At first, she was happy just knowing she had a father. In her previous life in Korea, she was an orphan. Although she made good friends and met people who treated her warmly, she always dreamed in her heart of having a real family. For this reason, she waited, even when she suffered abuse, lived as a slave, and was beaten. She held on to hope, believing her father would come one day to find her and save her. And then, she would finally have a family. But in her first life, she never met her father. In her second life, her longing grew stronger. Even when she was falsely accused, she sent him a letter through a maid. She asked the maid desperately if he had said anything, if he would help her. But the maid told her that her father said that he didn't have a daughter. These words struck her with deep shock. After being abandoned in 2 lives, she left the family in her 3rd life without hesitation. This was her 4th life, and there was no longer a place for a father in her life. Even if he had his reasons, the fact that he didn't help her remains the same. And if there were no reasons, her anger would be greater. In this life, she decided to focus on returning home, and she had no time to care for a father who didn't exist in her life. She calmed herself, realizing her uncle's question wasn't unexpected and that there was a real reason for her wanting to save him. She told him the reason she came to him first was that, even if he didn't remember, he was kind to her. This happened in her first life, when her uncle's madness was at its peak and everyone was screaming for salvation. Hyuk Bai-won was in a state of rampage, and the servants were screaming in terror, trying to push him into confinement. Everyone feared death and shouted for someone to stop him. In the midst of the chaos, one of the servants grabbed her and pointed at her, asserting she surely had excellent healing powers and asking if his words were true. Then he ordered her to go and stop him. She was pushed toward the rampaging beast, but Bai-won, despite his madness, whispered weakly, asking her to retreat and flee quickly. At that time, the Hyuk family planned to drive her eldest uncle into madness and throw him at their enemies, but when his condition went out of control, they pushed her as a scapegoat. She remembered her final breaths, and how Bai-won whispered as he embraced her that she was still so young. He apologized to her over and over, but she thought to herself that he shouldn't apologize, and that the real evil was this family that wouldn't let a person die in peace. She thanked him anyway, saying he might be the only person here who would mourn her death. He was her eldest uncle, the only person who was warm to her. Bai-won was surprised by her words, asking if she meant him by kind. So Hyuk Bai-woo thought that she ignored him in her last 2 lives because she didn't have the ability to help him, but this time she wanted to face him and help him. She told him with a smile that she told him he wouldn't remember. Bai-won was surprised, saying it was strange that he did not remember seeing such a beautiful child before, so his son Gaiwan remarked that his father sounded like a true scoundrel when saying such things. Barong interrupted grumblingly, asking, "What about me?" and questioned Hyuk Bai-yu why she came to see him after seeing his elder brother. Hyuk Bai-yu thought to herself that it was a bit embarrassing to say she had visited him to be a bodyguard against her eldest uncle's madness, so she replied that it was due to a few reasons, provoking the anger of Barong, who felt like a mere side dish. Hyuk Bai-yu suddenly feigned a cough to escape the situation, for she should have come to see him before his brother in the first place. She quickly changed the subject, reassuring her eldest uncle that everything would be all right now because she could treat him. Bai-won thanked her, saying he was extremely grateful even if they were just words. Barong stepped in and told his brother that he should believe her this time, for he himself had been skeptical at first. But he had woken up, after 3 days, thanks to her. Bai-won was surprised by his words. Barong emphasized that this meant she was the real deal, and not a fraud. Barong added enthusiastically that they might be facing a genius who would become the best not only in the city, but in the entire country. But Bai-won mocked him, saying his younger brother was jumping to conclusions and had become boastful after sleeping all the time. However, Bai-won thought that since his difficult younger brother spoke of her in this way, she must indeed be different from the doctors they had met so far. He turned to Hyuk Bai-yu, saying that she seemed to understand the ways of this place well for her age, and asked her a question. He asked her directly what she wanted in return for treating them. Hyuk Bai-yu thought her eldest uncle was as smart as she expected, for he noticed that her kindness was not purely altruistic. She told him that she currently wanted him to do only one thing, which was to be her guardian and take her to the medicinal herb market. Hyuk Bayu thought that she had now formed a connection with future warriors, and that it was time to move on to the next step, which is the stage of becoming the greatest doctor in the world. But Baiwon told her that he believed that might be difficult. She asked him why, and he explained to her that he and his younger brother were forbidden from leaving because they had lost control of themselves in the past and had a history of harming people. Hyuk Bayu was shocked by this news. Barang explained that their bodies were marked with a tracking scent, and that if they tried to sneak out, they would be caught and punished immediately. Hyuk Bayu felt great disappointment, for she had been looking forward to going to the market, and now she discovered that the warriors she had worked so hard to win over were under house arrest. She wondered in despair if there was any other way, as she was still young and could not go out on her own without a guardian. Baiwon told her that there was one person in this East Wing, only one patient, who was not forbidden from leaving. She immediately realized who he meant and whispered, "It can't be," and he confirmed that he meant her father, Hyuk Baiho. Hyuk Bayu felt dizzy. She could not believe that in the end, after all her attempts to ignore him, she was forced to go see her father. Later in the medicinal plant garden, while she was pulling one of the plants from the ground, she screamed loudly and then fell on her back, having finally succeeded in uprooting the plant at last. Hyuk Bayu cried out in despair while flailing on the ground. She was in dire need of high-quality medicinal herbs to treat the patients, and what was available in the East Wing was not enough at all. She thought angrily that one of the 3 largest markets in the empire was located just behind this wall, so why couldn't she go to it? She thought about sneaking out alone, but she quickly dismissed the idea, for who knows what could happen to a 3-year-old child alone. There were factions that kidnapped Hyuk family children to exploit their healing abilities. She sighed in despair, realizing that at this rate she must forget about becoming the greatest doctor in the world. In fact, she would not even stand out within her own family. Her despair was interrupted by the voice of her uncle Barang asking her what she was doing rolling on the ground, so she asked him if he had seen what happened. She laid the blame on him, so he answered her sarcastically, asking if she were an earthworm writhing in the dirt. She replied wittily, saying that in that case he must be the dirt, since earthworms purify the soil, which provoked his anger. At that moment, Gaiwan arrived and heard Hyuk Bayu's voice shouting his name. Gaiwan approached Barang, asking him angrily what he was doing. Gaiwan began scolding him, telling him over and over that Bayu was only 3 years old, but Barang interrupted, protesting that this was unfair, as this child had pinched him too. Gaiwan continued his scolding, reminding him that children must be treated with care, and asked him why he acted like this when he had a daughter of his own, to which Barang replied that he planned to be the kindest man in the world in front of his daughter. Hyuk Bayu wondered to herself how that could be possible when he destroyed his image every time he opened his mouth. Gaiwan stepped in and said he did not realize his youngest uncle was so ignorant of common sense, and suggested they have a conversation for an hour, but Barang refused angrily, wondering why he would waste his precious time on him. Gaiwan cleverly threatened him, asking if he would rather talk to his father instead. Barang immediately backed down, accusing him of playing dirty. Hyuk Bayu noticed that Gaiwan seemed uncomfortable around her uncle. She thought that 3 days had already passed since she met her uncle for the first time, and remembered when she asked her eldest uncle if only her father could do that. Hyuk Bayu became desperate and shortened her words, wondering if there was truly no other way. Baiwon answered her laughing, "No." Then he added, "But there is one way." He explained that if her father waived his guardianship rights to them, they might be able to negotiate with the family. Hyuk Bayu sighed in despair, for this meant she would have to meet her father after all. She sat grumbling, saying she had thought about it for 3 days and still hated the idea, and that she really did not want to see him. Gaiwan interrupted her, asking her what she was doing here. She answered that she was picking medicinal herbs, so he advised her to leave this kind of work to her youngest uncle, who had excess energy anyway. Gaiwan added that she could ask him as well, for after all, his father and her youngest uncle were not the only ones who were saved. He told her that she was his savior too, and she remembered that she had saved him from going to prison. She patted his head, telling him to grow up strong and become a swallow who returns the favor. Hyuk Bayu praised Gaiwan, saying he must grow strong and repay his debts. Gaiwan answered her in the affirmative. Suddenly, they heard a strange squeaking sound, which piqued Hyuk Bayu's curiosity. A small furry creature emerged from Gaiwan's clothes and made another sound. The creature jumped into the air and fell into the arms of Hyuk Bayu, who caught it in surprise. Her uncle caught her before she hit the ground. The little creature was making strange sounds as it settled in her arms. Baiwon told her that this was a nuso, so Hyuk Bayu was surprised by the name and thought it meant cerebral fluid. But Barang mocked her and asked why she was thinking of something so disgusting. He explained to her that he did not mean that, but rather a spirit beast made of lightning. When a natural ability user is exceptionally strong, the power itself gains consciousness and takes the form of an animal. Hyuk Bayu remembered that the original protagonist, Hyuk Ayan, had a spirit beast in the shape of a sparrow, and that the more the beast resembled a real animal, the stronger it was. Barang asked Gaiwan if he had one like it, noting that his eldest brother raises a black one. Hyuk Bayu wondered if her uncle possessed a spirit beast as well, and why she had not seen it when his rampage fit struck him, so Barang told her he had kept it sealed on purpose. He explained mockingly that he was already crazy, so what would happen if he unleashed another crazy beast on top of that? It was known that there were people from the Western continent who possessed spirit beasts, so it was not surprising. But she did not know that Gaiwan possessed one. She had never heard of this setting in the original novel before. Barang interrupted her, asking Gaiwan why he was pretending not to see it, for the beast was calling its master. Gaiwan admitted that he did not bring it out because he wanted to. Barang asked him if he was denying its existence. He told him that this was something others could not obtain even if they begged for it. He explained to him that these creatures grow on their master's recognition and trust, and that his beast was extremely frail, and if he continued to deny it like this, but Gaiwan interrupted him, saying he knew all this. Hyuk Bai-yu asked him what all this meant. Barang explained that it is very rare among ability users for their power to manifest as a spirit beast, and that they can become twice as strong through partnership with their beasts. But this only happens if the master recognizes their existence. At this rate, the little beast would not live long. Barang said that this boy was kicking his luck away, so Gaiwan shouted that he was not doing that. He admitted that he could not face it even if he wanted to. Barang asked him calmly if he was afraid that his father's illness was hereditary, and added that it was clear he would go mad if he possessed a spirit beast, and that he was terrified of harming more people, just like his father. Gaiwan shouted, asking him to stop, wondering what his youngest uncle even knew. Barang answered him that he knew very well, for he too was terrified that his daughter would inherit his illness. Their silence was interrupted by the voice of Hyuk Bai-yu, asking them why they were worried about such useless things. Hyuk Bai-yu interrupted their fears, saying that they had a genius doctor with them. Hyuk Bai-yu explained that when she diagnosed her eldest uncle 2 days ago, the amount of medicine he needed was less than what her other uncle Barang needed. In addition, she had experience in treating madness and seizures from her third life, so there would be no problems as long as she could get the right ingredients from the market, and she could also increase the efficiency of her body while making the medicine. Since she had a complete plan, there was absolutely no need for her cousin or her uncle to worry. She reminded Gaiwan that he had seen her ability for himself, and that even her sleepy uncle with an incurable disease had improved, which piqued Barang's irritation at this nickname. She told him confidently that she was more wonderful than he thought, and that he would be even more surprised the more he saw. She returned his spirit beast to him, telling him not to worry about other things and to only think about how to repay his debt to her. She reassured him that there would be no problems if he took the beast with him. Hyuk Bai-yu remembered that as far as she could recall, Gaiwan would become dark due to his father's death, but he would not suffer from madness, and she was determined to cure him for sure even if that happened. Gaiwan explained that he did not intend to get rid of his beast or ignore it completely. He admitted that he was afraid and terrified, and even wondered why this beast appeared when he never wanted it. He acknowledged that his uncle was right, and that he had always been afraid of falling ill with the same disease as his father, especially after the last doctor who visited. Them told him it might be hereditary, but now he feels that things might be all right. For even if he hated it, his father's condition worsened, and he had always imagined a future where he would also fall ill, but he no longer believed this would happen anymore. And all that was thanks to Hyuk Bai-yu. He promised that he would work hard to repay this favor, and that since she was amazing, she would need many warriors to protect her in the future. He said he wanted to become stronger too, and that he had been a bad master until now, but he hoped this poor creature would not disappear. He decided to face this child now. He embraced his spirit beast, promising it that he would no longer turn his back on it. Hyuk Bai-yu remembered a line in the original novel saying that the spirit beast and the ability user are life partners, tightly bound to each other. In her previous life, Gaiwan denied the existence of his partner and eventually got rid of it with his own hands. Hyuk Bai-yu wondered how he felt at that time, and she thought it is always good to see a patient overcome an ordeal and recover, although he is not exactly a patient. She added that there were times when these moments were the only consolation in this crummy world, which impressed Barang, but Gaiwan asked him not to touch him. Suddenly, the little spirit beast flew and landed on Hyuk Bai-yu's hand, so she asked it if it was thanking her. She thought about how cute it was, resembling a chick. This sweet moment was interrupted by her reminder to herself that she had no time to care for a non-existent father. But she saw that Gaiwan had chosen to face his fears, and believed that there was hope and a future. She decided that if that were the case, she must face it too, for it would be ridiculous to turn her back after shouting confidently in her cousin's face. Finally, Hyuk Bai-yu made up her mind and decided that she would go see her father. She sighed as she walked through the forest, heading toward her father's residence. She informed her uncle Baiwan and her cousin Gaiwan of her decision, and they appeared extremely surprised. They tried to prevent her from going alone, but she barely managed to convince them that she wanted to go alone this time. This was her father, Hyuk Bai-ho, who had never looked for her throughout her first 3 lives until she finally decided to visit him herself. She heard that her mother died of an illness early on, and that her father did not look for her even then. She had heard a lot during her 3 lives, so she almost knew what kind of disease he was suffering from, but since she decided to face him, she had to think calmly. From a purely practical standpoint, it was better for her to have a father to achieve what she wanted, so she decided to think about about how to use him and where she would need him. She decided to go and propose a contract to him and treat him strictly as a mutual contractual relationship because she did not need someone like a father. She walked through the deserted East Wing, and at its end there was a giant cherry tree. And the person there was her father. He called her, describing her as a beautiful child. He asked her who she was, and emotions took hold of her. She thought to herself, the daughter he abandoned across 4 lives, and realized that this man was her father. She had a lot to say, but before that, she wanted to call him by that name at least once. But what came out of her mouth was the word, uncle. She had to say it with a lot of resentment. He repeated his question about her identity. She noticed how huge he was, and thought she had lost her temper and called him uncle. But perhaps she should stop joking now. In this life, she needed to get along with this man, so she told him she was his daughter. He was surprised by her words, but he answered calmly that he did not have a daughter, so Hyuk Bayu thought it was an unsuccessful start. She understood the matter and concluded that his illness must have erased all his memories. His memories of his parents, brothers, friends, wife, and even her. Her father's illness, in Earth terms, was a kind of Alzheimer's, a disease in which memories deteriorate and bouts of mental fog occur frequently. She did not realize this until her 3rd life, but now none of that really mattered anymore. And she told him that she did not mind if he did not remember her. She told him that if he brought her into this world, he should at least take responsibility. So he looked at her saying he understood, and that he felt he had heard once that he was married, so it might be true. But then he wondered how he was supposed to believe that. When her father moved his hand, Hyuk Bayu felt the force of the wind swirling around her, and realized that this was the power of a wind mage, just as her uncle had told her. She remembered her Uncle Barang's question about her father's ability, and how Hyuk Bayu answered that she had not seen it even once. Barang was shocked by her words, wondering how she lived all this time alone, and whether that made any sense at all. Barang thought to himself, considering it a headache, and wondered why he was the one concerned and not his elder brother. Hyuk Bayu told him that her eldest uncle had returned to his isolation, saying he had not fully settled yet. Hyuk Bayu sighed, for this man makes her uncomfortable, and she feels as if he can see right through her. She threatened him that she would leave if he did not tell her, so he agreed immediately. Barang began to explain, saying that her father controls the wind, and he is ridiculously strong, almost as strong as their eldest brother, or perhaps stronger, and now lives alone near the far end of the East Wing, rarely coming out, and likely will not recognize her or her mother. But at least he knows he was married, but he cannot remember. Hyuk Bayu asked him about his illness, but Barang was confused and said he did not know. He pushed her gently toward her father's residence, telling her to go and see for herself. In the present, Hyuk Bayu thought she would have been shocked if she had not known of his ability beforehand. She noticed a pool of water nearby and wondered about its presence in a place like this. She thought she might need to use it if things went south, but her father interrupted her thoughts, wondering if she were saying she was his daughter. He said mockingly that she did not look like him at all, but she dared to say so impudently. She answered him that the reason was that she was a carbon copy of her mother, and that she too was surprised when she saw his image for the first time. But he told her she was not the first to say such nonsense. He grumbled, saying that his pitiful condition as a sick man made him look ridiculous, and now they were dragging children into their tricks. He told her coldly that he did not care about her motives and that he was not her father. She screamed at him angrily, calling him trash and double trash, so he asked her threateningly if she wanted to fall into the pond. She warned him that he would regret this, and told him that whether he believed it or not, she was a doctor and a pharmacist. He asked her disdainfully if a little child like her could do that, and she answered him that she does not lie and can prove it. She brought out a paternity testing tool for him. She explained to him that they would put a drop of blood from each of them on it. If they were related by blood, it would turn blue. Otherwise, it would turn black. And she told him she only needed 1 drop of blood. He pricked his finger and put a drop of his blood on the tool. She held it proudly and showed him the result, telling him it had turned blue. She wondered in surprise to herself how this place possessed something like a paternity test, and explained that thanks to the cases of illegitimate children of nobles, these reagents are more widespread here than on Earth. Her father told her that things like this can be easily manipulated, but she denied it, and told him to go out and examine the matter for himself to know if it was real or fake. She asked him if he wanted her to give him some of her blood to test for himself. He looked at her sarcastically and said that seeing how she treats her body recklessly, he believes she is of his blood. Hyuk Bayu told him that nevertheless, she must say what must be said, for what she wants to say does not concern whether they are related by blood or not. She confidently declared that she was his daughter and had come to treat him, asserting that she would heal his illness. And so she asked him to enter into a contract with her to be her guardian and help her. She took out a water bottle and offered it to him, saying that the treatment of the greatest doctor on the continent would be free and without interest, and all he had to offer was his work. She used her water power to show him proof of her words. Her father noticed she was using her powers, so he asked her to diagnose his condition. She asked him if he wanted her to do it now, and he answered in the affirmative. She agreed and unleashed her water power which surrounded him. She thought to herself that she was planning to do that anyway, but she did not expect him to agree so easily. She had treated diseases related to memory symptoms before, but she had never treated a disease exactly like her father's. She expected medicinal ingredients and prescriptions to appear to her, as happened with her 2 uncles. but nothing appeared. No ingredients, no recipes, nothing at all. She realized with shock that such results usually only appear when diagnosing the dead, and with the exception of the terminal illness she saw in her third life, she had never seen such results from a living person before. She wondered in despair if this meant she could not treat this person. Shock appeared on her face, and she realized it. The water faded from around him. He asked her calmly if she saw any answer. He told her she was in the end like the rest, and asked her to return now if she understood. He added that he would not hold her accountable for her false claim that she was his daughter. She clenched her fist tightly and said she had not lied. She admitted that she could not find the answer immediately, but her powers are real, and she had already shown him that she was a real pharmacist and doctor. She asked him angrily if he still did not understand after seeing all that. She insisted she was truly his daughter, and wondered why she would lie about something like this. She asked him if he thought she came here because she wanted to. She explained that she was forced to go to the market whatever the cost. For regardless of medicinal ingredients, there are many reasons to go there at this time. And whether he liked it or not, she had to convince him, for she knows he did not choose to get sick. She told him that nevertheless, he remains a truly terrible father, and expressed her hope that he would realize that one day. So he answered her coldly that, if she had finished saying all she wanted, she should get out of his sight now. So she turned her back on him and left in silence. Hyuk-Bae screamed angrily, wondering who was joking, and asserting that he is her father. Then she scolded him, asking who said he could not be cured, and mentioned that he gives up faster even than her uncle and her eldest uncle. She looked at the pond and thought that its water looked clean enough, and that there was no time to hesitate. It was a gamble, so she jumped in the water. She was surprised that the water was surprisingly clean. She said it was good and she could use that, then decided to use her final ability. Her father jumped into the water to save her, and she came out trying to catch her breath. She coughed hard, her father asking her angrily what the hell she was doing, explaining that this pond might look shallow, but its depth is great. She thanked him with a bright smile. Her father was surprised, so she told him she took back what she said about him being trash, for he saved her and was kind. He asked her if she had jumped on purpose, and she replied that she had her reasons, then asked him to submerge her in the water for a short time. He agreed to her request, and submerged herself and the patient, her father, in the clean water. Now all the conditions for activating her ability had been met. Her father looked at her in amazement. A huge aquatic spirit beast appeared. Then it opened its mouth and swallowed the two of them inside it. Inside the water, Hyuk-Bae said she would start the treatment now. She revealed her 3 abilities. The first is healing her wounds using water. The second is diagnosing the patient and knowing the necessary ingredients for his medicine. And the final ability, which she had never revealed to anyone before, is the ability to heal a patient in exchange for her lifespan. A tree representing her total lifespan appeared before her. She wondered how much lifespan she would need to use to treat this disease completely. A shocking result appeared before her. It would require all of her remaining lifespan. She wondered in despair if this meant she would die after treating her father. She realized there was no other choice, and that for now, it was better to focus on improving his condition rather than a complete cure. She decided to focus on restoring some of her father's memories instead. Meanwhile, inside Hyuk-Bae-ho's memories, Barang was begging his elder brother Hyuk-Bae-ho to let him go out instead of him, just for once. Hyuk-Bae-ho refused, saying he could not switch because he had a reason to go out. Barang mocked him, saying he was going to see that eldest sister again. And that was what their eldest brother said, and wondered if he was trying to escape because he was infatuated with her. Hyuk-Bae-ho was embarrassed and asked if it was that obvious. Meanwhile, Hyuk-Bae-yu was under the water, recalling a memory of her mother asking Hyuk-Bae-ho to include the character Yu in her daughter's name. Hyuk-Bae-yu saw her father with a woman in the garden and wondered if she were that woman, but she answered herself in the negative, saying that woman looked like her but was much more beautiful than her. Then she understood that woman was her mother. She regained consciousness from the memory and came out of the water. Her father was still standing in his place with a bewildered expression. So she asked him what he thought of her treatment. So he held her shoulders and asked her in shock who she was. And he told her that however great any individual's talent in the family was, there had never been someone like her, and asked her again about her reality. But she asked him to be silent by placing her finger on her lips, and she answered him with a mysterious smile that this was her trade secret. And she explained that her ability to treat diseases in exchange for her lifespan is a secret, and that her safety would be in danger if the matter were discovered, and mentioned that she had only used this ability once a long time ago, and she never imagined she would see her mother's face. She felt worried about a certain part, which was her father's loss of consciousness the moment her mother's memories appeared. So she concluded that it was likely her father did not see those memories, and wondered if the matter was related to his illness. But she remembered that her ability had already been proven. And then her father asked her what she intended to do after she proved her ability to him. So she smiled and pointed toward the family's main house, saying she was going there, to the Hyuk family main house, and explained to him her desire to be recognized and not to become an adult while being an outcast. And she offered him a contract and a deal, stating she would treat him in exchange for his help to her, and promised him that when she grew up she would be able to treat him better, and thought to herself that if she really returned home in this life, then this body would be of no use anymore, and told herself that just before returning she could use what remained of her lifespan to treat his illness. and therefore asked him to be her guardian and help her. After a long silence, he asked her for her name, so she reminded him she was his daughter, and answered him with a smile that her name was Hyuk Bai-yu. He repeated her name and commented that he had met many doctors and pharmacists, but she was the first to show any sign of improvement, and said he felt as if he were possessed to have a doctor of her age. And Hyuk Bai-yu thought that her father's improvement was temporary and that the symptoms would continue. And since he would forget the matter soon, she decided to speak comfortably and told him she came from another world. So he asked her if she had been sent there because she was sick too. So she answered him angrily that she was not sick and that her ability was real. Her father wondered to himself how to believe such a thing, but after a moment of thought, he agreed and told her he would help her and grant her wish. So Hyuk Bai-yu felt the warmth of his hand on her head and thought she was imagining that feeling of tenderness. And he told her what was said about both he and her mother having given a character to her name, noting that this was the only story she had heard about her parents in her third life, and added that she preferred that he did not remember that, considering their imminent separation made forgetting a better option. Hyuk Bai-ho remembered his daily routine. Since waking up in the morning and leaving the place, he would sit under the cherry tree until sunset, and strange thoughts occurred to him that he quickly forgot, with a feeling of wanting to go somewhere that soon dissipated because of his lethargy. And the dream of the red silk had occurred to him again, so he wondered about the identity of the woman behind the silk, who whispered to him that she would not tell him the gender of the fetus. He heard a clear laugh that pained his chest, but the dream always ended before he could approach her. He also remembered another scene of one of his sisters demanding his death, warning that if he completely lost his memory and became an enemy of the Hyuk family, he might turn his sword toward anyone because of his cruelty and loss of memory. And her husband supported her, describing his brother-in-law as a dangerous person who preferred to have his brain washed, while his other sister mocked, saying his empty head would make the brainwashing successful. And he remembered the assassin attacks that always coincided with the beginning of his forgetting, wondering about the identity of their sender this time among his sister or his brother-in-law or the family head, and decided that he did not intend to die quietly despite his feeling of exhaustion. And while he was standing at the pond, he remembered Hyuk Bai-yu's question about his opinion of her treatment and her request to accompany her to the market, so he finally called her his daughter. Hyuk Bai-yu woke up in her bed tired and wondered how she returned yesterday, so she remembered her excitement after the contract and her collapse on the way back as a result of exhausting her energy and the weakness of her childish body, and wondered if Hyuk Gai-won was the one who brought her. Someone interrupted her thoughts by asking her if she had slept well, so she screamed in panic and called him Mother. Then she told him he had startled her and asked him for the reason of his presence, and he answered he was watching her, because he entered a stable phase and wanted to see the face of their savior, which made her feel uncomfortable toward his smile. Hyuk Bai-woo woke up to find her eldest uncle, Hyuk Bai-won, watching her with a smile, and when she tried to pull away in surprise, he held her gently. He playfully wondered why she was trying to dodge him, expressing his sadness if she were to run away from him. As she was shouting at him to stop, he asked her not to just call him by the title Uncle. He explained to her with feigned seriousness that from now on she must call him Great Uncle. Hyuk Bai-woo was filled with confusion by his strange request and wondered to herself about the meaning of his words. But she refused his request, asserting that she would call him whatever she wished and asking him to leave her alone. However, he misunderstood her resistance, thinking she was enjoying his attention, and hugged her tightly while playfully offering himself to her, saying that if she wanted him, he was all hers. She shouted at his face in anger, denouncing what he was saying, so he went further in his joking and offered to give her his son, Gai-won, along with him in one deal, which Hyuk Bai-woo flatly rejected. At that moment, Gai-won entered carrying a breakfast tray and had overheard the conversation between them. Gai-won felt disappointed, saying that it was possible she didn't really want him. Bai-won was struck with shock and intense embarrassment at the sight of his son, while Hyuk Bai-woo was surprised by his presence and wondered when he had arrived. At the breakfast table, Hyuk Bai-woo tried to justify her awkward position, pleading with him not to misunderstand what had happened. Gai-won replied to her calmly, promising that he would forgive her on the condition that she finished all her food, which greatly relieved Hyuk Bai-woo. Hyuk Bai-woo began eating her food with enthusiasm and joy, promising that she would finish her entire plate. But Bai-woo was interrupted when he asked her if she knew that the porridge in her bowl contained beef, while their food contained chicken, in reference to the special care she receives as a patient, which made her choke on her food from the sheer surprise. Hyuk Bai-woo coughed hard, and Gai-won rushed to her in concern, but Bai-won quickly regained his composure and looked at Hyuk Bai-woo with admiration, commenting that she was a strong and tough girl and that he liked that. Then his features turned serious and he offered his sincere apology to her, explaining that he did not know of her suffering, for he had thought all along that she was living a prosperous life in the main house. He told her that the reason for this belief was that her mother had rendered a great service to the family. These words piqued the curiosity of Hyuk Bai-woo, who knew almost nothing about her mother, for she had always felt that there was someone who intentionally hid everything related to her. In all her previous lives, she had not been able to find out the truth, as either her mother had already passed away by the time she regained her memories, or she had left the family herself. Bai-won continued his apology, admitting that due to his illness, he did not even know of her presence in the East Wing. Hyuk Bai-woo realized the truth of his situation, for he was a man who spent most of his time out of his mind. So how could he care about his niece, who hardly meant anything in the eyes of the family? Hyuk Bai-woo shook her head in understanding, and Bai-won noticed that she might still be upset, so she suggested to them to go wash their hands. Gai-won stopped her, saying that he would prepare warm water for her. Then, Bai-won playfully suggested that he should chop some wood. He added, saying that since he is currently unemployed, he should at least perform the servant's work properly. But Gai-won warned him against destroying anything, reminding him of his habit of using lightning when he gets angry. Bai-won commented that his son was harsh on him, while Hyuk Bai-woo was watching them and thinking about what strange people they were, offering her all this care just because she helped them once. Later, while she was sitting with her father under the tree, she told him what happened, so he asked her why she was telling him these things. In another place, Bai-won and his son Gai-won were carrying wood, and annoyance was clearly visible on Bai-won. As Hyuk Gai-won was walking beside his father, he asked him about the reason for his strange reaction that day. He explained that he meant what happened during his rampage episode, where he put the red ribbon on the door as a sign of regaining his consciousness, while in fact his episode had not yet ended. Bai-won realized what his son meant, and told him that the reason for that was his sight of blood. He explained to him that after his episode had calmed down a bit, he found a bleeding bird in the garden, and by the time he saw it, it had already passed away. Gai-won commented that this matter had not happened before, and wondered with concern whether his father's condition was getting worse, but Bai-won answered him that he was not sure. Then he quickly regained his optimism, asserting that things would improve from now on, for the family's little genius, Hyuk Bai-woo, had promised to treat him. Meanwhile, Hyuk Bai-woo was telling her father, Hyuk Bai-ho, how her eldest uncle, Bai-won, had become an ally to her, even jokingly wondering if he should teach her father a lesson on her behalf. So Bai-ho asked her why she was telling him all this. She answered that she was alerting him in advance, for her uncle had become extremely protective of her, and might attack him for a mere simple misunderstanding, so he must be careful. And she reminded him of his sharp temper that she felt in their first meeting, advising him that he must learn when to control his nerves and be patient. Then she scolded him playfully, reminding him that all this mess that forced her to look for him started because he fainted on their way back, and that as her father, he must be able to handle such matters. She added sarcastically that if he had a problem with that, then he should take her home himself next time. She reminded him that he agreed to be her guardian, which is like being her personal warrior, and she emphasized to him that a warrior's duty is to protect the doctor. It seemed that her father had understood the matter, so he asked her what happened regarding her request to go to the market. He explained to her that there are procedures that must be followed and they cannot go immediately. And he told her that he needed a permit from the restricted area manager, and that he had already sent a message to the main building the previous night, and they could leave as soon as the permit arrived. Hyuk Bai-woo looked at him in surprise, so he asked her about the reason for her look. She admitted that she did not expect him to arrange the matter so quickly, so he replied, asking her if he annoyed her, even when he did what she asked. Then he jokingly reminded her that she was the one who asked him to obey her orders if he wanted to get better, so she feigned ignorance, wondering when she said such a thing. Her father commented that the perpetrator never remembers their crime, which piqued her indignation at being described as a perpetrator. She replied to him with feigned anger, reminding him that he was the one who threatened his daughter in their first meeting, and that she had traveled all this distance just to check on him. She announced that she would return home, and that he should tell her when he was ready to go to the market. But her father moved with her. Hyuk Bai-woo was surprised by her father's action, but he reminded her that she was the one who asked him to accompany her home, and he used his ability to control the wind to lift Hyuk Bai-woo, and told her that since he is the one who needs her, he is supposed to obey her orders. Her father carried her on his shoulders and promised her the fastest trip in the world, so Hyuk Bai-woo murmured in surprise while calling him father. He jumped into the air with immense speed, and she shouted at him to wait. While they were flying through the air, she shouted at him, calling him crazy, wondering what 3-year-old child rides a high-speed roller coaster like this. After they landed safely, Hyuk Bai-woo regained her composure. Her father asked her about her place of residence, and she thought to herself that she might be able to get out of the East Wing as long as she was with him. Later, she was struggling to grind some herbs in a large stone mortar, complaining that her small hands were constantly slipping. Hyuk Gai-won took the pestle from Hyuk Bai-woo's small hand. When she tried to take it back, saying she would do it herself, he mocked her gently, wondering what she could do with those small hands of hers. Gai-won scolded her for staying up late the previous night, and she answered him that she was preparing medicine for her uncles. She was thinking to herself that 2 days had passed since she last saw her father, and she had not received any news from him yet, so she had to occupy herself, even preparing a special medicine for him in case of any emergency. She wondered in concern when the reply she was waiting for would arrive, and threatened that she might storm the main building herself if it didn't come by tomorrow. At that point, Gaiwan offered to take over the grinding task and for her to go get some rest. Gaiwan noticed that she was very bad at asking for help and wondered why she didn't rely on the people around her. Hyuk Baiwoo was surprised by his question for a moment. Then she answered him that the reason was that she never had anyone she could rely on. She remembered her third life, where she barely managed to escape from her family and thought that everything would be fine. But she learned the hard way that the world is harsh on a girl who has no connections, regardless of her abilities. Then she recalled the memory of someone saying to her that this is what he likes about her. She remembered how she corrected him that he must call her doctor. So he praised her with sweet words, describing her as the greatest doctor of all time. He even added that she was the most beautiful in the entire continent. She remembered how she denounced his words and wondered about the relation of her beauty to the matter, so he asserted to her that she was truly beautiful. But in the end, this only person to whom she opened her heart was the one who betrayed her. Hyuk Baiwoo returned to reality, feeling that all her enthusiasm for work had suddenly vanished after she used her life force for the first time. She gave in and told Gaiwan to take over the task then. She handed him a basket of herbs and asked him to grind them. Then she pointed to a large pile of leaves and materials and asked him to take care of them as well. While Gaiwan was struggling with the tasks, she was watching him smiling, thinking to herself that he should not think that making medicine is an easy matter. While she was contemplating her surroundings, she noticed that her eldest uncle, Baiwan, was not present, so she asked Gaiwan about him. He told her that his father had gone to meet someone to inform him that he would not continue that work he told her about. He explained to her that his father went to the main building, that building located in the west wing of the Hyuk family properties, which looks like a wealthy small village unlike the deserted east wing, for it is home to a large number of people, from the head of the family to direct family members and other branches. Hyuk Baiwoo wished she had known he was going there to ask him to inquire about the permit she was waiting for she thought that when he said he would meet someone, he meant a friend of his. She commented impudently that she didn't think her uncle had friends and apologized to Gaiwan immediately. He reassured her that he didn't mean for her to apologize, for his father is the type who might lose his friends due to his sharp tongue. Hyuk Baiwoo wondered if he was too harsh on his father. Then she asked him whether he had stopped doing that strange work because she asked him to do so, and he answered her in the affirmative. Hyuk Baiwoo was overwhelmed with joy and felt satisfied. Then she seriously warned her cousin, Gaiwan, against doing such a thing again. Hyuk Baiwoo advised him to use his power with his spirit beast for better things, which made Gaiwan smile in admiration. Then she asked him about his spirit beast, Thunder Beast. As soon as Gaiwan called it, the small yellow creature that looks like a fluffy chick appeared. The creature flew directly toward Hyuk Baiwoo and landed on her nose, causing her to sneeze. While she was sneezing repeatedly, Gaiwan asked it to stop bothering her and to return to him. Hyuk Baiwoo commented that the stubbornness of his beast must be inherited from him, which Gaiwan denied. She asked him if it would remain in the form of a fur ball forever. So Gaiwan told her that he didn't know, but his youngest uncle told him that its shape would change as it grows with him. He added that his uncle said that as it grows older, it will turn into a shape closer to a real animal, and that spirit beasts that resemble animals from the beginning are stronger. So Hyuk Baiwoo remembered that the spirit beast of the story's protagonist, Hyuk Ayan, was in the shape of a sparrow from the beginning. Hyuk Baiwoo commented that this is expected from a protagonist who possesses all the advantages, and that her uncle knows about spirit beasts more than she expected. Gaiwan explained to her that the reason for that was that his youngest uncle, Berang's dream was to become a scholar, which struck her with surprise. She wondered to herself how a character like her uncle could dream of being a scholar, and Gaiwan told her that he heard that from his father, and that the matter did not suit him. He added that there was a period in which he studied hard with her father because of the first aunt. So Hyuk Baiwoo wondered in shock how her father, the man who exposed a 3-year-old child to a roller coaster experience, could have scholarly inclinations. Hyuk Baiwoo commented that her uncle doesn't seem like the type that is fit to be a scholar either. Gaiwan decided to change the subject and suggested to her to go out for a moment, saying that he has something he wants to show her. He took her to a small piece of land that had been newly plowed. He told her proudly that this is a herb garden he made with his father for her. He explained to her that the place where she used to go was very far, and that given that the East Wing is deserted, suspicious people might appear in it. He promised her that he would move the herbs little by little, and that his father would bring everything he could bring as well. Hyuk Baiwoo felt deeply touched, for she knows very well how dangerous the East Wing is, and had faced that in her previous lives. But to receive such a sincere gesture, she remembered how she was kicked out and accused of stealing and begging in the past. This was the first time she received such pure good intentions without hidden motives. She murmured the word, "thank you," while looking at the ground in gratitude. Gaiwan noticed that she was not good at expressing her thanks either, which Hyuk Baiwoo denied. Suddenly, a familiar voice interrupted their silence, and Hyuk Daewoo and his followers appeared before them. Hyuk Bai-woo was shocked to see him, for Daewoo was happy to find them in a place like this after he had searched for them everywhere. Hyuk Bai-woo wondered about the reason for that pig's presence here again, and noticed the presence of two other people accompanying him. They were from the official Hyuk family warriors. Daewoo asked them arrogantly if this was the first time they saw his warrior guards, boasting that, unlike them, he possesses the qualifications of a pharmacist. Hyuk Bai-woo thought that the doctors and pharmacists of the Hyuk family are given the protection of warriors, and that Daewoo had obtained this qualification thanks to the support of his first aunt. Then, Daewoo pointed at them angrily, wondering if his warriors saw them, and asserting that they are the ones intended. Hyuk Daewoo angrily announced that these two scum were the ones who poisoned him. Hyuk Bai-woo thought that using poison against a family member could be a serious matter depending on the circumstances. But in Daewoo's case, it was about poison he received from a 3-year-old child, and it would be extremely shameful to report such an incident to the family. In addition, his mother, the first aunt, cares about appearances excessively, and even if she knew the truth, she would not protest the matter as long as it was not influential. Therefore, Hyuk Bai-woo expected that he would harbor a grudge against her, but would get over the matter quietly. But she was wrong, for here is Daewoo returning for revenge. Daewoo ordered one of his guards to eliminate them, explaining that he has a lifelong contract that obliges him to protect him. The guard was surprised by the order to eliminate them, so Daewoo asserted that to him, describing them as children of criminals. He added that one of them is the son of a madman, and the other is the daughter of a mental patient, wondering about the reason for his hesitation, and noted that Daewoo is not present today. Hyuk Bai-woo realized that these two guards are not ordinary as long as they were appointed by the first aunt, for she knows that very well because she saw them countless times in her previous lives. Their faces bore the features of those accustomed to killing. Hyuk Gai-won stepped forward and asked Hyuk Bai-woo to step back. Hyuk Bai-woo held him anxiously, warning him against fighting, for she knows that no matter how strong he is, he cannot face official warriors, especially from the direct guard. Gai-won told her that he knows that, but at the moment he is the only person who can protect her. He added that she is not only his doctor, but she is his father's doctor too, so protecting her is his mission and his father's mission as warriors. Gai-won thought that he could not expect his father to come for help, as he had gone to the main house not long ago. Then he whispered to Hyuk Bai-woo that he would manage the matter somehow, and that she should seize the opportunity to bring their youngest uncle, for he might be awake. But Gai-won smiled confidently, explaining that there is someone else who can help, and he told her that this person is her father.